A college student with a fascination for the paranormal was thrilled when she learned about the old Whitmore farmhouse. Her friend Sarah mentioned it in passing, saying it had been abandoned for decades and had a reputation for being haunted. "Locals say it's cursed," Sarah warned, half-jokingly, as they drove down the winding country road that led to the farmhouse. "They say anyone who goes inside hears voices, whispers that come from the attic." Emily brushed off the warning with a laugh, but a chill ran down her spine as they pulled up to the house. The farmhouse loomed in front of them, its weathered wooden boards creaking in the wind, and its broken windows dark and hollow, like empty eye sockets watching them. The air felt heavy, charged with an eerie stillness, as if the house were holding its breath, waiting for them to enter. "I'm telling you, this place gives me the creeps," Sarah muttered, clutching her flashlight tightly. "Are you sure about this?" Emily, determined to prove that she could handle the haunted house, nodded and led the way toward the front door. They stepped inside, the floorboards groaning beneath their feet as they took in the stale, musty scent that filled the air. Dust coated every surface, and faint scratch marks lined the walls, hinting at stories the house refused to reveal. They wandered through the dark, empty rooms, their flashlights illuminating faded wallpaper and old furniture covered in sheets. But no matter where they went, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't alone. It was as if someone, or something, was watching them from the shadows. Suddenly, a faint sound drifted through the silence. It was soft at first, barely audible, but then it grew louder, a whisper echoing from the ceiling above. "Come closer." The voice was childlike, innocent yet unsettling, and it sent shivers down their spines. Sarah froze, gripping Emily's arm. "Did you hear that?" Emily nodded, her pulse quickening. The whisper was coming from the attic. The attic door was old, its wood splintered and warped from years of neglect. As Emily reached for the handle, a sense of dread washed over her, stronger than anything she'd felt before. It was as if the house itself was warning her to stay away. But her curiosity overpowered her fear. Taking a deep breath, she turned the handle, and the door creaked open, revealing a narrow staircase that disappeared into darkness. "Are you sure about this?" Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. But Emily was already stepping onto the first stair, her flashlight barely cutting through the thick shadows that seemed to gather around her. The staircase was steep and creaky, each step groaning under their weight. With each step, the air grew colder, carrying with it a faint scent of decay. Emily's heart raced as she climbed, her footsteps echoing up into the dark attic above. Behind her, Sarah's breathing was shallow, each exhale catching in her throat as she followed reluctantly. Halfway up, they heard it again, a whisper, soft but unmistakable, like a child giggling and calling to them. "Come play." The voice was playful, but it held a sinister edge that sent a chill down Emily's spine. She glanced back at Sarah, who looked pale and terrified. "Emily, maybe we should go back," Sarah stammered. But before Emily could respond, the door at the bottom of the staircase slammed shut, trapping them inside. The sound reverberated through the house, and they both froze, staring at each other in horror. There was no way out now. They had no choice but to keep going. As they reached the top of the stairs, their flashlights illuminated the attic, revealing a strange sight. The attic was empty except for a single rocking chair placed in the center of the room, facing the wall. It was covered in dust, but the floor around it was clean, as if someone had been using it recently. Emily felt her pulse quicken as she took a step closer, her eyes fixed on the chair. And then it began to rock, slowly at first, then faster, as if an unseen force was sitting in it, swinging back and forth. The rocking chair continued to sway, creaking rhythmically as Emily and Sarah stood frozen in place. A cold draft swept through the attic, sending shivers down their spines. Emily stepped forward, compelled by a mixture of fear and curiosity. "Who's there?" she called, her voice shaking slightly. "Show yourself." The chair halted abruptly, and an eerie silence enveloped the room. The air felt thick, charged with an unspoken tension. Sarah moved closer to Emily, clutching her arm tightly. "This isn't funny anymore," she whispered, her eyes darting around the room as if expecting something to leap out at them from the shadows. Suddenly the whispers returned, louder and clearer, echoing around them like a haunting melody. "Come play with us. We want to play." The voices sounded like a chorus of children, their laughter mixing with a sense of foreboding. It felt as though the walls themselves were closing in, the shadows flickering ominously in the corners of their vision. Emily shone her flashlight around the attic, desperate to find the source of the voices. The beams of light danced across the wooden beams and dusty corners, revealing old trunks and forgotten toys, but no sign of life. "We should get out of here," Sarah urged, panic rising in her voice. "Please, let's just go back down." But Emily shook her head. "I have to know what's happening. There's something here." She took a deep breath, trying to steel herself, and approached the rocking chair, her heart pounding in her chest. As she reached for it, a sudden coldness enveloped her, and the whispers grew louder, swirling around her like a tempest. "Join us," they chanted, a mix of giggles and cries reverberating in her mind. Emily recoiled, feeling an unseen force pushing against her, but she forced herself to stay put, determined to uncover the truth. She glanced at Sarah, whose face was pale with fear, eyes wide with terror. "Sarah, can you hear them?" Emily asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "They want us to stay." But the fear in Sarah's eyes told Emily that her friend was already slipping into a panic. Without warning, the rocking chair flew backward, crashing against the wall with a loud thud. Emily jumped back, her heart racing. The whispers stopped abruptly, replaced by an eerie silence that pressed heavily on her chest. Then, as if responding to their fear, the shadows in the attic began to shift and swirl, coalescing into dark shapes that danced just beyond the reach of their flashlights. "Get away from there!" Sarah shouted, pulling at Emily's arm, trying to drag her back toward the staircase. "This isn't right. We need to leave." But Emily stood frozen, eyes fixed on the darkness. "Wait, do you see that?" She pointed toward the far corner of the attic, where a shadowy figure seemed to emerge from the wall, its form flickering like a dying flame. It was small, childlike, with hollow eyes that glowed faintly in the dark. "Please, come play," the figure whispered, its voice soft yet haunting. Emily felt a mix of fear and empathy, her heart aching at the sight. It looked lost, trapped between two worlds. She took a cautious step forward, compelled to help. Emily's heart raced as she approached the shadowy figure, drawn to it like a moth to a flame. The air around her grew colder, and she felt an overwhelming sense of sadness emanating from the creature. Sarah, still clinging to Emily's arm, whispered urgently, "Don't go near it. It's not safe." But the figure looked so small and fragile, its shape barely holding together as if it were made of smoke. "Please," it called, its voice barely more than a whisper. "I just want to play. They won't let me leave." The sorrow in its voice pierced Emily's heart. "Who won't let you leave?" Emily asked, her voice trembling as she stopped just a few feet away. The figure's hollow eyes seemed to gaze deeply into her soul, searching for understanding. "The others," it replied, and as it spoke, the shadows around the attic shifted, forming vague outlines of other children, their faces twisted in anguish. "They're trapped, just like me. Help us." A wave of empathy washed over Emily, and she felt compelled to help. "We can help you. Just tell us what to do." But even as she spoke, doubts crept into her mind. What if the figure was luring them deeper into the house's sinister past? "No one can hear us," the figure continued, its voice growing softer. "We just want to go home." It extended a small, shadowy hand towards Emily, who hesitated. Suddenly, Sarah pulled her back, breaking the connection. "We need to leave. This isn't right, Emily. They're not real. They're just shadows." Panic surged in her voice as she looked around the attic, her eyes darting back to the rocking chair, now eerily still. The shadows began to flicker angrily, and the whispers rose to a deafening crescendo. "Help us, help us!" they chanted, echoing off the walls like a ghostly chorus. Emily felt a sharp pang of guilt as she glanced between Sarah and the shadowy figure. Torn between fear and compassion, she stepped back. "Sarah, we can't just leave them here," Emily insisted, her voice rising above the cacophony. "They need our help." But Sarah was already moving toward the stairs, urgency written across her face. "Emily, please, they'll hurt us. We have to go." Before Emily could respond, the shadows surged forward, coalescing into a thick mist that enveloped the attic. The air felt electric, and Emily could hardly breathe. She turned back to the figure, her heart racing. "What do you want us to do?" The figure's eyes widened with fear, and it backed away, dissolving into the swirling darkness. "Don't let them take you," it cried, its voice fading into the chaos around them. With a sudden rush of panic, Emily felt the pull of the shadows. They wrapped around her like icy tendrils, threatening to drag her into the darkness. "Sarah!" she screamed, reaching for her friend, but the shadows were relentless. "Run!" Sarah shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. Emily's instincts kicked in and she turned to flee, racing toward the staircase as the shadows lashed out behind them. The attic door was still shut tight, but Emily could hear the whispers growing louder, more frantic, as if they were warning her of a danger she couldn't comprehend. Emily's heart pounded like a drum in her chest as she sprinted toward the staircase, the cold tendrils of shadow nipping at her heels. "Emily, hurry!" Sarah cried, her voice barely audible over the chaotic whispers. The shadows writhed and twisted around them, their coldness creeping into Emily's bones, trying to drag her back into the darkness. As Emily reached the bottom of the stairs, she slammed her shoulder against the attic door, but it wouldn't budge. "It's locked," she gasped, fear surging through her. The whispers transformed into a cacophony of screams, drowning out her thoughts. "Help us, help us," they wailed, echoing in her mind. "Emily, we need to find another way," Sarah shouted, pulling at her arm, desperation etched across her face. Emily turned back to the attic, where the shadows seemed to pulse with a life of their own. The figure was gone, swallowed by the darkness, but the malevolent presence remained, pressing in on them. "Find a window, we can break it," Emily shouted, trying to drown out the panic rising within her. They scanned the room, eyes darting across the dusty attic clutter. The only source of light was their flickering flashlight, illuminating the old trunks and forgotten relics. "Over there." Sarah pointed toward a small window set high in the wall, obscured by cobwebs. "If we can reach it, maybe we can get out." Without hesitation, they dashed toward the window, but as they did, the shadows surged forward, thicker than before. The darkness felt alive, and Emily could hear the whispers rising again. "Join us. Forever." The shadows clawed at them, their chill biting into her skin, as if trying to pull them back into the depths of the attic. "Emily, I can't," Sarah cried, her voice cracking with fear. "It's too much. I can't breathe." "Just keep moving," Emily shouted back, forcing herself to push through the fear. She leaped onto an old trunk, reaching for the window. The wood creaked beneath her weight, but she didn't care. "Help me up," she urged, and Sarah quickly followed suit, climbing onto the trunk. As Emily grasped the window ledge, she felt a sudden surge of energy coursing through her, the whispers turning into frantic cries. "Help us, let us go." "No, don't leave us," another voice wailed, piercing through the chaos. The shadows began to swirl around them, forming a wall of darkness, trying to block their escape. With a determined scream, Emily pushed herself up, straining against the weight of the shadows that pulled at her legs. "Come on, Sarah, we can't give up." She managed to hoist herself into the window, her hands grasping for the ledge. The cold wind rushed in, pulling her hair back and filling her lungs with the scent of rain and earth. "Emily," Sarah cried, panic in her voice as she slipped back, nearly falling off the trunk. "I can't hold on." Emily reached down, her heart racing as she grasped Sarah's hand, pulling with all her strength. "You can do it! Just hold on!" With a final surge, Sarah managed to climb up beside Emily. Together they squeezed through the narrow window, scraping their arms against the rough edges. Emily's heart raced as they tumbled out into the night air, landing in a heap on the soft grass below. As Emily and Sarah landed on the ground, a surge of adrenaline rushed through them. They scrambled to their feet, gasping for breath and glancing back at the attic window they had just escaped. The whispering shadows loomed ominously at the edges of the old house, twisting and writhing as if furious at their departure. The air was thick with tension and the wind carried the echo of the children's cries, faint yet persistent. "Did we get away?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling. She looked around, trying to catch her breath. The yard was eerily quiet, illuminated only by the moonlight filtering through the clouds. The chilling atmosphere made Emily's skin crawl, but she knew they couldn't stop now. "We have to keep moving," Emily urged, glancing back at the house. Shadows flickered in the windows and she felt a chill run down her spine. What if they follow us? With quick determination, they made their way toward the overgrown path that led away from the house, stepping carefully over twisted roots and uneven ground. Each step felt heavy, as if the shadows were still clinging to them, unwilling to let them escape. As they navigated through the trees, the whispers grew fainter, but never disappeared entirely. Instead, they seemed to transform into something else, a low hum that resonated deep within Emily's mind. It was as if the house was alive, its presence wrapping around them like a dark fog. "Did you hear that?" Sarah suddenly stopped, her eyes wide with fear. "It's like they're still here." Emily turned her head, straining to listen. The forest felt alive with an unsettling energy, and she couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. "We just need to keep moving," she whispered, trying to sound braver than she felt. As they continued down the path, the trees seemed to close in around them, their branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. Suddenly, Emily felt a rush of cold air against her back, causing her to shiver involuntarily. She turned to look behind her, half expecting to see the shadows pursuing them, but there was only darkness. "Emily." Sarah's voice quivered, breaking through her thoughts. "I think we're being followed." "What do you mean?" Emily asked, her heart pounding. "Look." Sarah pointed behind them. Emily turned, and for a brief moment, she thought she saw a flicker of movement in the shadows. It was gone before she could focus, but the sensation of dread settled in her stomach. "Let's just keep going," Emily urged, quickening her pace. "We have to get to the road." But as they pushed forward, a strange sound echoed through the trees, soft, melodic, yet tinged with sadness. "Help us. Help us." The voices rose and fell, intertwining with the rustling leaves. The haunting melody sent chills down Emily's spine, pulling at the very edges of her consciousness. "Emily, I can't take it anymore," Sarah shouted, her voice rising in panic. "We need to get out of here." "Stay close." Emily grabbed Sarah's arm tightly, trying to reassure her. "We're almost there." But with each step, the shadows seemed to swirl around them, drawing closer as if the house itself was refusing to let them escape. The whispering grew louder, filling the air with an unbearable weight. "Help us. Don't leave us." The voices became desperate, resonating deep within Emily's mind, creating an almost unbearable sense of guilt. She felt the pull of the shadows growing stronger, like invisible hands reaching out to grasp her. "Emily, please," Sarah screamed, her eyes wide with fear. "We have to run." With a renewed surge of determination, they sprinted down the path, branches whipping against their faces as they dashed through the darkened woods. Emily could feel her heart racing in her chest, and she pushed herself harder, focused on reaching the safety of the road. As they burst into a small clearing, the road loomed before them, a narrow, winding path lined with trees. But as they stepped onto it, Emily stopped dead in her tracks. The shadows had followed them, gathering at the edge of the clearing, a mass of darkness swirling with sinister intent. The whispers crescendoed into a chilling chorus, the voices merging into a single plea that echoed in the night. "Don't leave us. Don't leave us." Emily and Sarah stood at the edge of the clearing, their hearts pounding in sync with the whispers that grew louder, more insistent. The shadows coiled and writhed, pulsating with an energy that felt alive, as if they were feeding off the fear radiating from the two girls. The cold air wrapped around them like a vice, and for a moment time seemed to freeze as they exchanged terrified glances. "What do we do?" Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. She instinctively moved closer to Emily, seeking comfort in her presence. "We can't let them trap us," Emily replied, trying to summon courage. "We need to fight back. Remember the stories we heard? They feed on fear." She felt a surge of determination wash over her. They had come this far. They couldn't let the darkness win. Drawing a deep breath, Emily stepped forward, raising her chin defiantly. "You won't take us. We're not afraid of you." The moment the words left her lips, the shadows hissed in response, a sound like static electricity crackling in the air. The darkness pulsed and swelled, as if angered by her defiance. "Emily!" Sarah grabbed her arm, panic flashing in her eyes. "What are you doing? We need to run." "No, we need to confront it. It's trying to scare us. We have to show it we're not afraid," Emily insisted, her heart racing. She focused on the shadows, her mind swirling with memories of the stories they'd heard about spirits trapped in darkness, souls that needed to be set free. "What do you want from us?" she shouted, her voice cutting through the ominous silence. The shadows shivered, and for a brief moment the whispers morphed into a single voice, a child's voice, soft and pleading. "Help us. Please." "Who are you?" Emily pressed, her resolve hardening. "Why are you here?" "We are lost. We can't leave," the voice replied, a mix of sadness and despair echoing in the night air. The shadows began to coalesce into more defined shapes, the outlines of small figures appearing within the darkness, their faces twisted in anguish. "Why can't you leave?" Emily demanded, her heart aching at the sight. "What binds you to this place? We were trapped. Long ago. We need someone to set us free." The voices swirled around them, filling the air with sorrow. Emily felt a pang of empathy, realizing that these were not just malevolent spirits. They were lost souls, crying out for help. "Set you free? How?" Emily asked, her voice firm yet gentle. "You must remember," the voice echoed, drifting through the shadows. "Remember our pain, our fears, and let them go." "Let them go?" Sarah echoed, confusion washing over her. "Yes," the voice insisted, growing stronger. "You have the power to help us. You must face your fears and show us the way." Emily's mind raced as she processed their words. They were being asked to confront not only the darkness that had haunted them, but also the fears that lay within. "What if we can't?" she whispered, doubt creeping in. "You must try," the voices urged, their tone rising in desperation. "We are counting on you." With her heart pounding, Emily turned to Sarah, determination filling her gaze. "We can do this. We can face our fears together." "But what if it's too much?" Sarah's voice trembled. "Together," Emily repeated firmly. "We can't let them suffer because of our fear." Taking a deep breath, Emily stepped forward again, her voice steady. "We are not afraid of you. We won't let fear control us any longer." Taking a deep breath, Emily stepped forward again, her voice steady. "We are not afraid of you. We won't let fear control us any longer." As the words echoed through the clearing, the shadows began to swirl around them, the coldness biting deeper. The whispering intensified, but Emily focused on the figures emerging from the darkness. Children, their faces pale and haunted, looking to her with pleading eyes. "Please, help us," they whispered in unison. "I'm here," Emily cried out, her heart swelling with empathy. "We're here. We will help you find peace." The shadows recoiled, and Emily felt a surge of energy pulse through her, a warmth spreading from her heart. "Let go of your fear," she urged the spirits. "You don't have to be trapped any longer." The figures hesitated, their faces twisting with uncertainty. "We are scared," one of the children whispered, tears glimmering in their eyes. "I know it's scary," Emily replied, her voice soothing. "But holding on to fear will only keep you here. You have to trust us. We want to help you." Suddenly, the shadows surged forward, swirling around Emily and Sarah. The air grew thick with a suffocating darkness, and Emily felt the weight of countless fears pressing down on her. She gasped, struggling to breathe as panic threatened to overtake her. "Emily!" Sarah shouted, her voice rising in panic. "No! We have to fight!" Emily insisted, pushing through the fear. She closed her eyes, focusing on the warmth in her heart, the connection between them. "Together, we can do this." With every ounce of strength, Emily willed herself to release the fear, picturing it dissipating like mist in the morning sun. "You are free. You don't have to be afraid." As the warmth grew stronger, the shadows hesitated, swirling uncertainly. Emily felt the energy shift, the darkness beginning to recede as the spirits looked at her, their faces softening with hope. "Help us," they pleaded once more, but this time, it was filled with a longing for freedom rather than despair. "Yes," Emily cried, her voice breaking through the fog of darkness. "Let go of the pain. You can find peace. We'll be with you." The shadows began to shimmer, swirling with light as Emily's heart filled with warmth and determination. "You are not alone. You can be free." In that moment, the dark figures started to dissolve, their anguish lifting like a veil. "Thank you." Their voices echoed softly, filled with gratitude as they melted into the night. As the last of the shadows faded, Emily and Sarah collapsed to the ground, gasping for breath. The air was clear now, free of the suffocating darkness that had surrounded them. They looked at each other, tears streaming down their faces, the fear giving way to relief. "We did it," Sarah whispered, disbelief washing over her. Emily nodded, her heart still racing. "We helped them." But deep inside, a new fear began to creep in. Was the darkness truly gone? Or would it return to haunt them again? The clearing was now bathed in moonlight, the oppressive darkness that had clung to Emily and Sarah dissipating like smoke. But even as the last echoes of the whispers faded, a lingering chill settled over them. They exchanged shaky breaths, both knowing that the ordeal was far from over. "Do you think it's really over?" Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. She hugged her knees to her chest, eyes darting around as if expecting the shadows to return. "I don't know," Emily admitted, pulling her jacket tighter around her. "I want to believe it is, but—" She trailed off, glancing back toward the old house, its silhouette looming against the night sky. There might still be something left. Determined to face whatever remained, Emily stood up, brushing off the dirt from her jeans. "We have to go back inside. We need to see if there's anything we can do to cleanse the house for good." Sarah hesitated, fear evident in her eyes. "But what if the shadows come back? What if we didn't help them all?" "We can't let fear stop us now," Emily replied, her voice steady despite her own uncertainty. "We faced the darkness once. We can do it again." As they approached the house, the door creaked ominously, almost as if it was beckoning them inside. Emily pushed it open, and the musty smell of the old house filled their lungs. The atmosphere felt different now, lighter, yet tinged with an underlying tension. "Do you feel that?" Sarah asked, shivering slightly. "Like something's watching us?" "Yeah," Emily replied, swallowing hard. "But we can't let it intimidate us. Let's go upstairs, to the attic." The stairs creaked under their weight as they climbed, the dim light from their phones flickering like hesitant fireflies in the dark. Each step felt like an echo of the past, a reminder of the fear they had just battled. Reaching the attic door, Emily hesitated, her hand hovering over the doorknob. "Are you ready?" she asked Sarah, who nodded but didn't look convinced. With a deep breath, Emily turned the knob and pushed the door open. The attic was as they had left it, shrouded in darkness, the dust motes dancing in the faint light filtering through a small window. The eerie silence enveloped them, making every heartbeat sound like thunder in their ears. "Let's find a way to cleanse this place," Emily said, her voice breaking the silence. She pulled out the journal they had found earlier, flipping through the pages filled with notes and sketches of rituals and protection spells. There has to be something here that can help. As she read through the instructions, the shadows in the corners of the attic seemed to shift and writhe, as if aware of their presence. Emily felt a chill run down her spine but forced herself to concentrate. "Here, this one talks about using salt to purify spaces," she said, her finger tracing the ancient text. "Do we have salt?" Sarah asked, glancing around nervously. "Let's check the kitchen," Emily suggested. They hurried down the stairs, hearts pounding as they moved quickly through the dimly lit rooms, searching for anything they could use. In the kitchen, they found a small container of salt in a cupboard. "Got it!" Emily exclaimed, holding it up triumphantly. "Now we just need to go back to the attic and make a protective circle." As they ascended the stairs again, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. "What if the shadows don't want us to do this?" she asked, her voice tinged with anxiety. "Then we'll show them we're not afraid," Emily replied, her determination hardening. Back in the attic, Emily poured a circle of salt on the wooden floor, the grains glimmering in the pale light. "We need to stand in the center and chant this," she said, pointing to the words in the journal. "Do you really think it will work?" Sarah asked, glancing nervously at the dark corners of the attic. "We have to try," Emily urged, her heart racing. "We owe it to the spirits to help them find peace." They stepped into the circle, hands clasped tightly. With a deep breath, Emily began to chant the words, her voice steady and clear. Sarah joined in, and as they spoke, the air around them began to change. A breeze swept through the attic, rustling the papers and sending chills down their spines. "Let the light of our hearts cleanse this space. Let the shadows be free. Let them find their place," Emily recited, her voice growing stronger with each line. As they continued to chant, the shadows flickered, swirling like smoke around the edges of the salt circle. A low hum filled the air, vibrating through their bodies, and Emily felt a connection forming between them and the spirits that lingered in the house. Suddenly, a cold wind rushed through the attic, extinguishing the light from their phones. Panic surged through Emily and Sarah, and they clutched each other tightly, their voices faltering. "Keep going," Emily shouted, determination fueling her. "We can't stop." With newfound strength, they pushed through their fear, their voices rising in unison. "We call upon the light to banish the night. Let the shadows go. Let the spirits know." As they reached the climax of their chant, a brilliant light erupted from the salt circle, illuminating the attic with a warmth that chased away the chill. The shadows recoiled, swirling violently before being drawn into the light, their whispers transforming into sighs of relief. "Thank you," echoed a chorus of voices, filling the room with gratitude. The spirits once tormented began to dissolve, their faces softening into serene smiles as they faded into the light. In that moment, Emily felt a surge of energy, a wave of warmth washing over her. The attic felt lighter, the oppressive weight lifting, and she knew they had done it. They had helped the spirits find peace. As the last of the light faded, Emily and Sarah stood in the now empty attic, breathless and wide-eyed. "We really did it," Sarah whispered, disbelief flooding her voice. "Yes, we did," Emily replied, her heart swelling with pride. "We freed them." But even as they felt the victory settle within them, the shadows in the corners of the attic still whispered, soft and low. "Is it truly over?" Emily wondered, uncertainty creeping back in. We did what we came to do, Sarah reassured, though her voice wavered. But we should stay vigilant just in case. Let's keep the journal, Emily suggested, tucking it under her arm. We can research more about this place and its history. Maybe there's something else we can do. Good idea, Sarah nodded, though the fear in her eyes hadn't completely faded. But let's get out of here first. As they descended the stairs, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that they had merely scratched the surface of the mystery that lay within the old house. There were layers to the darkness that still lingered, shadows that hadn't been completely vanquished. Once outside, the fresh air filled their lungs, and they paused to catch their breath, their hearts racing with adrenaline. We should call someone, Sarah suggested, glancing back at the house. Maybe a paranormal investigator or something. There could be more we don't know. Yeah, that's a good idea, Emily agreed, her mind racing with possibilities. We'll figure it out together. No matter what happens next, we'll face it together. As they walked away from the house, the moon shone brightly above them, illuminating their path. The whispers faded into the night, leaving behind a lingering sense of mystery and a promise of new beginnings. They had faced the darkness and emerged stronger, but they both knew that their journey was far from over. The following days were a blur of emotions for Emily and Sarah. The relief of having helped the spirits was overshadowed by an unshakable sense of curiosity. What had they really uncovered? What was the true story of the haunted house that had kept its secrets hidden for so long? Determined to find answers, they headed to the local library, a place where whispers of the past seemed to linger among the dusty shelves. As they entered, the musty scent of old books enveloped them, and Emily felt a sense of familiarity wash over her, as if the library itself was a treasure trove waiting to be explored. Where do we even start? Sarah asked, glancing around at the myriad of books and archives. Emily recalled the journal's cryptic notes. Maybe we should look for old newspaper clippings or records about the house and its former inhabitants. They headed to the archives, where rows of file cabinets held yellowing papers and faded photographs. As they sifted through the documents, Emily felt a growing sense of unease. The deeper they dug, the more they uncovered strange accounts of the house. "Look at this!" Sarah exclaimed, pointing to an article dated back to the 1960s. It talks about a family who lived there, a mother and her 2 children. They disappeared without a trace. Emily leaned closer, reading the article that detailed the mysterious circumstances surrounding their disappearance. Local lore spoke of strange occurrences and unsettling noises emanating from the house before the family vanished. "It's like the house devoured them," Sarah whispered, her eyes wide with fear. "But why? What happened to them?" Emily pondered, her mind racing with questions. "We need to find out more." They continued their research, uncovering more articles and even some journals written by townsfolk who had lived nearby. Many recounted eerie stories of shadows flitting through windows, disembodied voices echoing in the night, and feelings of being watched. The longer they read, the more they realized that the house was a focal point for tragedies and unexplainable phenomena. As they pieced together the narrative, a pattern emerged, a cycle of despair that seemed to plague anyone who lived there. Each family had encountered inexplicable fears leading to conflict, breakdown, and ultimately, abandonment. "This house has a history of pain," Emily mused, her voice trembling slightly. "It's like a curse. But it can't just be that. There must be a way to break it," Sarah replied, a determined glint in her eye. "We freed the spirits that were trapped here, but what about the darkness that remains?" That question weighed heavily on them as they left the library, the sun setting in a fiery glow. They decided to return to the house one last time, armed with their newfound knowledge and the hope that understanding its history might help them find closure. As dusk settled over the house, the atmosphere felt electric, charged with anticipation. Emily and Sarah stood at the front door, their hearts pounding. "Ready?" Emily asked, gripping the journal tightly. "Ready," Sarah replied, her determination shining through the fear in her eyes. Stepping inside, the air felt thick and heavy, a stark contrast to the lightness they had felt after cleansing the space. "It's different now," Emily observed, her voice echoing in the silence. "Like the house knows we're here for answers." They ascended to the attic, the creaking floorboards beneath them amplifying the tension. Once inside, Emily opened the journal to a section detailing a ritual for confronting dark energies. "We have to acknowledge what happened here," she explained. "Maybe that will help us dispel the lingering darkness." Sarah nodded, though unease flickered in her eyes. "Okay, let's do this." Following the ritual's instructions, they created another salt circle and lit a candle, the flickering flame casting shadows that danced across the walls. Together, they took a deep breath, closing their eyes as they began to recite the words. As their voices intertwined, a powerful force surged through the attic, the temperature dropping sharply. Shadows flared at the edges of the room, swirling with increasing intensity. Emily and Sarah could feel the weight of the house's sorrow pressing down on them. "Why do you linger?" Emily shouted, forcing her voice above the howling wind that filled the space. "What do you want?" In response, the shadows coalesced, forming vague shapes that seemed to writhe in pain. Flickering images danced before them, visions of the family who had vanished, their faces twisted in fear. Emily's heart ached for them, realizing that they were trapped, caught in a cycle of anguish and despair. "Help us," a voice whispered, barely audible over the storm. "We can't escape, we need to be free." Emily and Sarah exchanged a glance, understanding dawning between them. "You're not alone," Sarah cried out, her voice steady. "We're here to help you find peace." With renewed vigor, Emily and Sarah continued the chant, their voices rising above the cacophony. The shadows responded, swirling violently, as if battling against an unseen force. "Let us go. Release us," they cried in unison, their anguish palpable. As the energy intensified, Emily felt her heart race, the very essence of the house vibrating with emotion. "We acknowledge your pain. We honor your suffering," she yelled, determination igniting within her. In that moment, the shadows began to twist and stretch, the figures becoming clearer. The faces of the family emerged, eyes filled with longing and sorrow. "Thank you," they whispered, the weight of their despair lifting as the shadows started to dissolve. As the last words of the chant fell from Emily's lips, a brilliant light erupted from the salt circle, enveloping the room. The shadows screamed, but it was a cry of release, not of pain. The figures of the family smiled one last time before vanishing into the light, leaving behind a palpable sense of calm. When the light faded, the attic felt transformed. The heavy air lifted, and an overwhelming sense of peace washed over Emily and Sarah. They stood there breathless and awestruck as the last echoes of the whispers faded into silence. "We did it," Sarah whispered, tears of relief streaming down her face. "Yeah," Emily replied, her heart swelling with pride. "We helped them find peace." As they made their way out of the house, the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the sky in hues of orange and purple. The haunted house stood still, but it felt different. No longer a place of despair, but a site of healing. Outside, they paused to look back one last time. "Do you think it's really over?" Sarah asked, her voice a mixture of hope and uncertainty. "I think it is," Emily replied, a smile breaking through her exhaustion. "We faced the darkness, and we came out stronger, together." With that, they turned away from the house, ready to embrace whatever came next. They had uncovered the truth, helped the lost souls find peace, and, most importantly, had discovered the strength within themselves. As they walked into the night, the air was crisp and clear, carrying with it the promise of new beginnings. They knew that while the shadows might always linger, they had found a light strong enough to guide them through. It was a chilly October evening when Jason received an unexpected letter. The thick parchment felt heavy in his hands, adorned with ornate lettering that read, You are cordially invited to Hollow Manor for a weekend retreat." He couldn't believe it. His old friend Mark had inherited the sprawling estate from a distant relative. After years of neglect, Mark wanted to celebrate its restoration with a small gathering of friends. Jason's excitement was palpable. He remembered hearing stories about Hollow Manor during his childhood, a mysterious house that had been the center of ghostly tales and eerie occurrences. However, the allure of adventure far outweighed any lingering fear. He quickly packed his bags, eager to reconnect with Mark and explore the infamous manor. As Jason drove toward the estate, he couldn't shake the feeling that the trees lining the winding road were whispering secrets. Their twisted branches reached out like skeletal fingers, and the mist clung to the ground, weaving through the underbrush like a ghostly fog. He finally arrived at Hollow Manor, its towering silhouette looming against the darkening sky. The house was magnificent and haunting, its once vibrant exterior now a faded testament to time. Chipped paint flaked off the weathered wood, and vines snaked up the walls, reclaiming what nature had lost. Jason parked his car and stepped out, a thrill running down his spine. The air felt electric, alive with stories waiting to be uncovered. Mark greeted him at the door, a broad smile lighting up his face. "You made it," he exclaimed, pulling Jason into a hearty embrace. "I can't wait for you to see the place. It's got history. Trust me." As they entered the manor, Jason was enveloped by the musty scent of aged wood and dust. The grand foyer stretched out before him, adorned with portraits of long-gone relatives, their eyes following him as he moved. A grand staircase spiraled upward, its railings intricately carved, while a chandelier hung precariously above, its crystals catching the dim light. "Make yourself at home," Mark said, gesturing to the spacious living room filled with mismatched furniture. "I'll finish setting up the guest rooms. We'll have dinner soon." As Jason wandered through the manor, he felt a strange pull toward the upstairs hallway. The floorboards creaked beneath his feet and a chill ran down his spine. He noticed a door at the end of the corridor slightly ajar, a sliver of darkness beckoning him closer. Curiosity piqued, he pushed the door open, revealing a dusty room cluttered with old furniture and forgotten memories. In the corner stood an antique mirror, its surface clouded with grime. As he approached, he felt a sense of unease wash over him. Something about the mirror felt alive, as if it was hiding secrets of its own. Suddenly, a faint whisper echoed through the room, sending shivers down his spine. "Leave. Now," it urged, but Jason couldn't tear his gaze away from the mirror. Something flickered in its depths, shadows dancing just beyond his vision. He stepped back, heart racing, and decided to leave the room. But as he turned, he felt an inexplicable force holding him back. The whisper grew louder, more insistent. "Get out." Jason's instincts kicked in, and he stumbled backward, bursting through the door and slamming it shut behind him. His heart raced, and he leaned against the wall, breathing heavily. What was happening in this house? He needed to find Mark. Dinner that evening was filled with laughter and stories, the dining room illuminated by the flickering glow of candles. Mark had invited a few friends, each as intrigued by the manor's history as Jason was. They exchanged tales of the place, each one more chilling than the last. "Did you know the original owner went missing?" One friend, Lisa, remarked, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "They say his spirit roams the halls searching for something he lost." "Yeah, and his family followed suit," another chimed in, leaning closer to the table. "Every generation that's lived here has encountered something strange. It's almost like the house is cursed." Jason felt a knot form in his stomach. Was it just a story, or was there truth in their words? He decided to brush off the unease, but his mind kept drifting back to the mirror and the whisper he had heard. After dinner, they gathered in the living room, where the fireplace crackled, casting shadows that danced on the walls. The ambiance was warm, but an undercurrent of tension lingered in the air. Mark proposed a game of truth or dare, and the group erupted in cheers, eager to share their secrets and face their fears. As the game progressed, Jason remained quiet, lost in his thoughts. It was his turn, and Mark nudged him playfully. "Come on, Jason. Truth or dare?" Jason hesitated, finally opting for truth. "What's the creepiest thing you've ever experienced in this house?" he asked, a mix of curiosity and apprehension. Mark's expression shifted, his smile fading. "There was one night when I heard footsteps in the attic. I was sure I was alone, but it sounded like someone was pacing back and forth. When I finally worked up the courage to check, there was nothing there. Just silence." The room fell silent, the weight of his words hanging in the air. Jason glanced at the others. Their expressions were a mix of fear and intrigue. "Maybe it's just the house settling," Lisa suggested, attempting to lighten the mood. "Or maybe it's the spirits trying to communicate," Mark replied, a hint of seriousness creeping into his tone. "Come on, we're not scared of some old ghost stories," another friend piped up, attempting to bring back the jovial atmosphere. But Jason's mind was racing. The footsteps in the attic, the whispers he had heard, were they all connected? He decided to change the subject, pushing aside his growing unease. As the night wore on, the laughter faded, and one by one they drifted off to their rooms. Jason found himself unable to sleep, his mind swirling with thoughts of the manor. Finally, he decided to explore the house further, hoping to quell his racing heart. With the moon casting an eerie glow through the windows, Jason tiptoed through the darkened hallways, the floorboards creaking softly beneath him. He made his way up to the attic, the place Mark had mentioned earlier. When he reached the attic door, he hesitated, heart pounding in his chest. The atmosphere felt thick with anticipation. Gathering his courage, he turned the handle and pushed the door open. Dust particles danced in the air, illuminated by the pale moonlight. The attic was a treasure trove of forgotten items, old trunks, furniture draped in white sheets, and a collection of dusty books that seemed to whisper secrets of their own. But what caught Jason's eye was an old rocking chair that swayed gently as if someone had just vacated it. As he stepped inside, a chill swept through the room, making him shiver. He approached the rocking chair, feeling an inexplicable urge to touch it. The moment his fingers brushed against the wood, a sudden rush of memories flooded his mind. Visions of a family, happy moments spent in the attic, laughter echoing through the walls, overwhelmed him. But the warmth quickly shifted to sorrow. Images of the same family crying, searching desperately for something they could never find. The visions were vivid, and Jason felt a deep sense of loss wash over him. Suddenly, the air turned icy, and he heard a soft whisper. "Help us," it pleaded, a voice echoing from the shadows. Panic surged through him and he stumbled back, colliding with the trunk. He hit the floor, heart racing, gasping for breath. "Who are you?" he shouted into the darkness, fear gripping him tightly. In response, the rocking chair began to move faster, the whisper growing louder. "Help us. Find peace." Jason realized that this house was not just a dwelling. It was a graveyard of memories, a place where souls lingered, trapped in the echoes of their past. With every ounce of courage, he stood up, his heart still pounding in his chest. "I will help you," he called out, desperation mingling with determination. "I promise." The following day, Jason confided in Mark about his experience in the attic. "I think there are spirits trapped in this house," he explained, recounting the whispers and the visions he had seen. Mark frowned, his brow furrowing with concern. "It wouldn't surprise me. Hollow Manor has always had a dark history. I just thought it was all superstition." Jason was determined to uncover the truth. "We need to dig deeper. There must be a reason they're here." Mark agreed, and together they spent the day researching the manor's history. They pored over old records, searching for information about the original owners and their tragic fate. After hours of digging through dusty archives, they stumbled upon a local legend, the story of the Hollow family, who had lived in the manor over a century ago. The family had mysteriously disappeared one stormy night, leaving behind an empty house filled with unanswered questions. "They say the mother was searching for her child when she vanished," Mark read aloud, his voice shaking. Her spirit is said to roam the halls, searching for her lost son. Jason felt a chill run down his spine. This was the connection they needed. The whispers in the attic and the rocking chair. It all made sense now. The spirits were trapped, longing for closure. That evening, they gathered their friends to share the findings. The atmosphere was tense as Jason explained the Hollow family's tragic history. "We need to help them find peace," he urged. "If we can uncover what happened to the child, maybe we can set their spirits free." Reluctantly, the group agreed to join him in the attic that night. Armed with candles and a sense of purpose, they climbed the stairs, the darkness of the manor closing in around them. As they entered the attic, the atmosphere felt different, charged with energy. Jason placed the candles in a circle, the flickering flames casting eerie shadows on the walls. "Let's reach out to them," he suggested, closing his eyes and focusing on the energy around him. "If anyone is here, please show us a sign." The room fell silent, the only sound being the crackling of the candles. Suddenly the temperature dropped, and a gust of wind swept through the attic, extinguishing the flames. In the darkness, they heard the faint sound of a child's laughter, echoing through the walls. Jason's heart raced as he felt a presence fill the room. "We're here to help you," he called out, his voice steady despite the fear coursing through him. The whispers returned, clearer this time. "Find him. Find him." Mark glanced around nervously. "What do we do?" "We need to find out where the child went," Jason replied, determination fueling his words. "There must be something left behind." The group began searching the attic frantically, overturning boxes and rummaging through old belongings. Then, Lisa stumbled upon a hidden compartment in the floorboards. With a little effort, they pried it open, revealing a dusty old diary. As they opened the diary, the pages crumbled slightly, but the words were still legible. It belonged to the mother, detailing her anguish as she searched for her missing child. Each entry was filled with despair, the last one reading, "I will never stop searching for you, my dear. I will find you." Tears filled Jason's eyes as he read the final words. "We need to find the child," he said softly. "We can't leave them like this." Fueled by a newfound determination, the group decided to search the grounds of Hollow Manor for any sign of the child. They split up, each searching a different area of the estate. Jason made his way to the overgrown garden at the back of the manor. The sun was setting, casting an orange hue over the landscape. As he explored the dense foliage, he stumbled upon an old playset, half buried in the ground, its colors faded by time. Suddenly he heard a soft giggle coming from the trees. "Hello?" he called out, his heart racing. The laughter echoed again, this time closer. "Help me!" the voice pleaded, sending chills down his spine. Jason followed the sound, pushing through the thick brush until he reached a clearing. In the center stood a lone tree, its branches reaching out like skeletal arms. At the base of the tree, he spotted something glimmering, a small locket. He knelt down, picking it up carefully. The locket was old but beautiful, engraved with delicate patterns. He opened it, revealing a faded photograph of a little boy, smiling innocently. Tears welled in his eyes as he realized this was the lost child. The whispers grew louder, surrounding him. "Thank you. Thank you," they echoed, a chorus of voices filling the air. Suddenly the wind picked up, swirling around him, and he felt a warmth enveloping him. It was as if the spirits were finally at peace, their presence fading into the ether. Jason returned to the others, locket in hand, his heart pounding with excitement. "I found him," he exclaimed, holding up the locket for everyone to see. Mark's eyes widened in disbelief. "Is that—" "Yes, this was his," Jason replied, feeling the weight of their journey lifting. "I think this is what they were searching for." As they gathered together, Jason explained what he had discovered. The atmosphere shifted, a sense of relief washing over them. "We need to hold the locket in the attic," Jason suggested. "It'll give them the closure they need." They returned to the attic, and Jason placed the locket in the center of the circle formed by the candles. He closed his eyes once more, feeling the energy around them. "If you can hear us, we want to help you find peace. You are not forgotten." As he spoke, the room filled with a soft, warm light. The air crackled with energy, and Jason felt a profound sense of calm wash over him. "Thank you," the voices echoed, resonating through the walls. "We are free." In that moment, a wave of relief surged through the group. The spirits of Hollow Manor were finally at peace, their stories no longer trapped within the walls. The following morning, the sun shone brightly, illuminating the once dark corners of Hollow Manor. The atmosphere felt lighter, as if a weight had been lifted. As they packed their belongings to leave, Mark turned to Jason. "I can't believe what we experienced. Thank you for helping them." Jason smiled, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. It was a journey we all needed. Hollow Manor may be haunted, but now it's a place of healing. As they drove away, Jason glanced back at the manor, its silhouette no longer foreboding but rather a reminder of the stories that bind us. The echoes of Hollow Manor would forever remain etched in his memory, a testament to the power of compassion and the importance of honoring the past. The dare was simple: spend Halloween night at Blackwood Manor. Mark, Jenny, and Adam stared at the old mansion as it loomed over them like a dark specter. The house had stood abandoned for as long as they could remember, its towering spires and cracked windows giving it a sinister allure. Legends told of the Blackwood family who had perished mysteriously within its walls, leaving their restless spirits to haunt the mansion for eternity. They'd heard the stories of cold shadows moving across the walls, of whispering voices and faces peering out from the darkness. But they'd laughed it off. It was just an old house, right? The three of them stood at the edge of the property, staring up at the broken windows and the ivy-covered walls. Jenny hesitated, biting her lip as she peered into the darkness beyond. "Guys, are we really doing this?" she whispered, her voice barely audible over the rustling leaves. Mark, the self-proclaimed fearless one, smirked and nudged her. "Scared already, Jenny?" he teased. Adam chuckled, trying to mask his own nervousness. "It's just a house," he added, though his voice lacked conviction. They pushed open the creaking iron gate and made their way up the overgrown path, their flashlights casting eerie shadows on the walls. The front door was slightly ajar, as if inviting them inside. Mark took the lead, gripping the old brass doorknob and giving it a firm shove. The door groaned, opening to reveal a grand hallway lined with portraits of people with hollow eyes. Dust motes floated in the air, and the floor creaked beneath their feet. An icy chill swept through the air, raising goosebumps on their arms. They stepped inside, their footsteps echoing in the silence. As they moved deeper into the house, Jenny felt an intense sense of unease. She couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Her flashlight flickered, and in the brief darkness she swore she saw a shadow dart across the far wall. Did you see that?" she stammered, her voice barely a whisper. Mark turned to her, laughing it off. "Relax, Jen. It's probably just a rat." But as they continued exploring, the sense of dread only grew, thickening the air around them. Unseen whispers brushed past their ears, soft and unintelligible, as if the walls themselves were speaking. As the three friends moved deeper into the heart of Blackwood Manor, the temperature seemed to drop with every step. Their breaths fogged in the air, visible despite the thick, oppressive silence around them. Shadows played tricks on their minds, and Jenny felt as if invisible hands were brushing against her skin. Her heart pounded as she tried to ignore the nagging sense of dread clawing at her. Mark, determined to prove himself, led the way down a narrow hallway that seemed darker than the rest of the house. The walls were lined with cracked paintings of grim-faced people who seemed to stare at them, their eyes following every step. Adam nudged one of the paintings, grinning nervously. They really went all out with the creepy decor, didn't they? He whispered, but his voice shook. Suddenly, there was a loud thump from above, like a heavy object crashing to the floor. All three froze, glancing at each other with wide eyes. "What was that?" Jenny whispered, her voice barely audible. Mark shrugged, trying to keep his composure. Probably just the house settling. But as soon as he finished speaking, another thump sounded, closer this time. And then they heard it. A soft, steady sound, almost like footsteps shuffling across the ceiling, coming closer. Adam's flashlight flickered, casting strange shadows around them. They stood in silence, listening as the footsteps grew louder. Then, just as suddenly as they had started, the footsteps stopped. An eerie silence filled the room, pressing down on them like a weight. "I think we should leave," Jenny whispered, clutching her flashlight tightly. But Mark shook his head. "No way. We're not letting some old creak scare us off." He took a bold step forward, just as a cold breeze swept past them, carrying with it the faint sound of a child's laughter, echoing from somewhere deep within the house. The faint laughter sent chills through Jenny, and her resolve to stay was quickly crumbling. But Mark pushed forward, pretending not to notice her unease. "Come on," he whispered. "Let's check out the upstairs. That's probably where the noise came from." Reluctantly, Adam and Jenny followed, their flashlights flickering as they climbed the grand staircase that creaked beneath their feet. Dust clouded the air with each step, and the portraits lining the walls seemed to glare down at them, as if warning them to turn back. At the top of the stairs, they entered a wide corridor. The hallway stretched before them in dim, ghostly light, with doors on each side leading into pitch-black rooms. Jenny's flashlight landed on a small, unmarked door at the end of the hallway. She froze, feeling her heartbeat quicken. There was something about that door, something she couldn't explain, that made her want to run in the opposite direction. "Let's go check that room," Mark suggested, already heading toward the unmarked door. Jenny reached out, grabbing his arm. "Mark, I don't think we should go in there." But he shook her off, flashing a grin that barely masked his own nervousness. "What's the matter, Jen? Scared of the boogeyman?" He opened the door and an overwhelming smell of decay wafted out, thick and suffocating. Inside was a small room, barely more than a closet, with rotting floorboards and faded wallpaper peeling off the walls. But there was something odd on the floor. A set of tiny footprints, as if a child had been standing there recently. Adam bent down, examining the footprints with a frown. "These look fresh," he whispered, "like someone was just here." Suddenly, a faint whisper brushed past their ears, so close it was almost as if someone was standing right behind them. They spun around, flashlights scanning the darkness. But there was no one there. Only the echo of a child's voice whispering, "You shouldn't be here." The whisper hung in the air, chilling them to the bone. Mark tried to laugh it off, but the sound died in his throat as they heard footsteps echo down the hall. They spun around, shining their flashlights back into the corridor, but there was no one. Just shadows stretching across the dusty floor, shifting eerily as their lights moved. Maybe it's just the wind," Adam muttered, but his voice wavered, betraying his fear. Jenny shook her head, her face pale. "That wasn't the wind, Adam. There's someone here." She could feel eyes on her, watching from every shadowed corner, and the urge to run was overwhelming. Mark tried to lead them back toward the stairs, but as they turned, they found the hallway was longer than they remembered, stretching out in impossible twists and turns. The staircase, which should have been right behind them, was gone, replaced by more doors and dead ends. This doesn't make any sense," Mark stammered, panic creeping into his voice. They were trapped, lost in a house that seemed to be shifting around them, its darkened halls alive. Jenny's flashlight landed on one of the doors, slightly ajar. Unlike the others, this one had markings carved into the wood, symbols that looked ancient, filled with anger and warning. She felt a pull toward it, as if the room itself was calling her name. "Guys, I think we should go in here," she said softly, almost entranced. Inside, the room was empty except for a large mirror leaning against the far wall, its surface cloudy and warped. As they approached, the reflection shifted, and they saw not their own faces, but a family: mother, father, 2 children, all staring back at them with hollow, soulless eyes. And then, one by one, the family in the mirror turned, pointing accusingly at them, their mouths moving silently in a voiceless scream. A sudden, icy breath whispered in Jenny's ear, "You'll never leave." Jenny stumbled back, her heart racing as the family in the mirror continued their silent scream, their faces contorted with pain and rage. She grabbed Mark's arm, her voice barely a whisper. "We need to leave. Now." But when she turned, the door they'd entered through had vanished, leaving them trapped inside the room with only the haunted mirror for company. The mirror seemed to pulse, a faint ghostly glow emanating from its depths, casting their shadows on the walls in strange, distorted shapes. Adam shined his flashlight around, frantically searching for another way out, but all he found were walls closing in around them. The room felt smaller, tighter, as if it were breathing, drawing them closer into its dark grip. Mark moved toward the mirror, almost in a trance. Maybe this is the way out," he said, his voice distant. He reached out to touch the glass, but as his fingers brushed against it, the surface rippled like water, and a cold, bony hand shot out, grabbing his wrist. Mark screamed, trying to pull away, but the hand's grip was unbreakable. The fingers were skeletal, covered in scraps of decaying skin, and they pulled him closer, as if trying to drag him into the mirror itself. Jenny and Adam rushed to help, grabbing Mark and pulling with all their strength. But as they tugged, more hands emerged from the mirror. Small, ghostly hands like those of children. They clawed at Mark, their hollow eyes filled with sorrow and anger, their mouths moving as they chanted, "Stay with us. Stay forever." The room filled with whispers, rising to a deafening crescendo. Jenny's mind raced with fear, every instinct screaming for her to run, but there was nowhere to go. She felt the hands clawing at her too, cold fingers brushing her skin, sending shivers down her spine. And then, just as quickly as they'd appeared, the hands let go, retreating back into the mirror, leaving the room silent once more. The 3 friends stumbled back, gasping for breath as the reflection in the mirror twisted, showing their own terrified faces trapped inside. The silence that followed was suffocating, thick and unnatural. Jenny, Mark, and Adam stared at their own faces trapped inside the mirror, their reflections distorted, as if pleading for help from the other side. But the worst part was that the reflections didn't move in sync with them. Instead, they watched with hollow eyes, slowly raising their hands in unison, pointing back at the real Jenny, Mark, and Adam. A cold realization settled over them. They weren't just looking at reflections. They were looking at something. Waiting. Mark backed away, shaking his head, his voice trembling. "This isn't real. It can't be." But as he moved, the mirror faces mimicked his fear, their mouths stretching into twisted smiles that didn't match his own expression. They mouthed words he couldn't hear, their eyes glistening with malice. Jenny felt the walls closing in around her, and a sense of dread settled in her bones, rooting her to the spot. Adam clenched his fists, forcing himself to focus. "We need to get out right now." He grabbed Jenny and Mark, pulling them toward the place where the door had once been. With trembling hands, he traced his fingers along the wall, hoping to find a seam, a hidden latch, anything that could offer a way out. But the wall was cold and solid, an unyielding barrier between them and freedom. The air grew colder still, and a low, raspy voice filled the room, echoing from all directions. "You've seen too much. Now you belong to us." The friends exchanged horrified glances as the light in the room began to dim, replaced by a sinister red glow seeping from the mirror. Their distorted reflections stepped forward, hands pressing against the glass as if trying to break free. Shadows began to twist around them, forming the shapes of ghostly figures, children, adults, families, all with empty, accusing eyes. Jenny could feel her strength fading, a cold numbness creeping over her limbs. She forced herself to speak, her voice a broken whisper. "Please, let us go." But the ghostly figures only smiled, their faces dark with malice. As the shadows closed in, Jenny realized they were standing in a place where time held no meaning, where every soul who had dared to trespass had become trapped forever. In a final act of desperation, she closed her eyes and screamed, hoping against hope that someone, anyone, would hear them. But all that answered was the echo of her own voice, swallowed by the darkness of Blackwood Manor. The silence that followed was suffocating, thick and unnatural. Jenny, Mark, and Adam stared at their own faces trapped inside the mirror, their reflections distorted, as if pleading for help from the other side. But the worst part was that the reflections didn't move in sync with them. Instead, they watched with hollow eyes, slowly raising their hands in unison, pointing back at the real Jenny, Mark, and Adam. A cold realization settled over them. They weren't just looking at reflections. They were looking at something, waiting. Mark backed away, shaking his head, his voice trembling. "This isn't real, it can't be." But as he moved, the mirror faces mimicked his fear, their mouths stretching into twisted smiles that didn't match his own expression. They mouthed words he couldn't hear, their eyes glistening with malice. Jenny felt the walls closing in around her, and a sense of dread settled in her bones, rooting her to the spot. Adam clenched his fists, forcing himself to focus. "We need to get out, right now." He grabbed Jenny and Mark, pulling them toward the place where the door had once been. With trembling hands, he traced his fingers along the wall, hoping to find a seam, a hidden latch, anything that could offer a way out. But the wall was cold and solid, an unyielding barrier between them and freedom. The air grew colder still, and a low, raspy voice filled the room, echoing from all directions. "You've seen too much. Now you belong to us." The friends exchanged horrified glances as the light in the room began to dim, replaced by a sinister red glow seeping from the mirror. Their distorted reflections stepped forward, hands pressing against the glass as if trying to break free. Shadows began to twist around them, forming the shapes of ghostly figures, children, adults, families, all with empty, accusing eyes. Jenny could feel her strength fading, a cold numbness creeping over her limbs. She forced herself to speak, her voice a broken whisper. "Please, let us go." But the ghostly figures only smiled, their faces dark with malice. As the shadows closed in, Jenny realized they were standing in a place where time held no meaning, where every soul who had dared to trespass had become trapped forever. In a final act of desperation, she closed her eyes and screamed, hoping against hope that someone, anyone, would hear them. But all that answered was the echo of her own voice, swallowed by the darkness of Blackwood Manor.